welcome to Untamed Unfiltered. I'm Amanda Nicholson.
And I am Aaron Provencio. And today we are joined by three incredible individuals, and that is Brie Hashem, Ben Cole, and Dr. Cameron Berg. How's it going today, guys?
Doing well.
Yep, pretty good.
I'm not hungry anymore because I got to eat lunch.
Hey, good stuff.
And by 1:15 in the afternoon, you're doing well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for taking time to join us today. We are doing it again on Untamed Unfiltered. We're having an absolute party of people with us here today. Just figured the more the better, especially for this sort of episode. So we are diving into careers in wildlife, and we thought we'd take this opportunity to have a variety of guests, and particularly ones that were not in the show, because we really were striving to go with the maximum number of people that we could talk to about this category. A lot of people want to know all the time, how do I get started with a career in wildlife medicine, rehabilitation, education, whatever it is? And I think from our perspective, the answer is there's no exact one correct pathway. So we figured what better way to demonstrate that than to talk to a variety of people and just find out some more.
That's right. And so to help us convey that message, we brought together three different folks with different backgrounds and different educational paths, and some a little bit more non-traditional than others. So to get us started, would the three of you mind going through and telling us about who you are, who you're with, and what you do for the organization?
Hi, I'm Brie Hashem, and I am the new director at Rockfish Wildlife Sanctuary.
Hi, I am Ben Cole. I am the Wildlife Rehabilitation Intern here at the Wildlife Center of Virginia.
Hi, I'm Cameron Berg. I'm the current veterinary intern at Wildlife Center of Virginia, or one of the two, I should say.
And Aaron, I should add in here that we are acting as hosts as usual, but we're kind of also filling in the gaps for outreach and education, so representing here as well. So we'll be tossing our answers in too. So I'm Amanda Nicholson. I am the Vice President for Outreach and Education at the Wildlife Center of Virginia.
And I'm Aaron Provencio again, and I am the Outreach Communications Coordinator, also here at the Wildlife Center of Virginia.
Awesome. Well, I figured that the things that we want to know are, how did you get started in this field? Where did you go to school? What's your degree? And what was your first job? What have you done? Just kind of the whole pathway. But instead of each of us kind of taking that long and meandering story path, why not just kind of do everything in rapid fire, short order question? So my first question to kick us off is, what did 6-year-old you want to do when you grew up?
I wanted to be a professional soccer player.
I don't think
Turns out I'm not that good.
I think that even at 6 years old, I knew what the word ornithologist was, and I would say ornithologist.
Wow.
I think I'm going to have to shoot for the most ridiculous and say I wanted to be a police dog.
Awesome.
I used to want to be a paleontologist until I realized that living animals were a lot more interesting than dead ones.
Interesting. All right. And 6-year-old Amanda wanted to be a veterinarian.
All right, cool. So as we went through, all of us kind of had different ideas of what we wanted to be when we grew up. And some of us to be professional athletes. Some of us knew exactly we wanted to work with birds our entire lives. I don't even think I learned the word ornithologist until this time last year. But all of us did go through kind of a traditional 4-year undergraduate program, and we all graduated with a degree. So would you mind going around and telling us what that degree was in?
Sure, mine was in environmental resource management.
Mine was a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting.
I graduated with a degree in a biology major with a physiology emphasis and a chemistry minor.
I got my degree in wildlife biology with a minor in Spanish language.
and my degree was in straight up biology.
Okay, so I'm outnumbered is what you're telling me.
So yeah, so that's interesting. Some of us perhaps followed that pathway. Some of us took a diversion. Actually, I should have added this in earlier, but let me back up one step and ask. We started off with, what did 6-year-old you want to do? What did 16-year-old you want to do?
Oh, I think I was hopelessly lost.
I'm trying to remember if 16-year-old me had started to get to the point where they realized that they wanted to do acting, or if that was the phase where I was like, I'm going to be a music video director. But it was one of those two.
I think 16-year-old me knew he wanted to do something with animals, but wasn't really sure what I was going to do with it. I was just kind of just learning from my classes in high school, and I thought biology was really neat.
Yeah, I think at that point I was really on this idea that I was going to be on Animal Planet, and I haven't really gotten there, but I mean this is pretty close, I think. So at least there's that.
And 16-year-old Amanda wanted to be a veterinarian. So that's really interesting. Definitely some things happened between 6 and 16 for most of us anyway, getting redirected and then going on to college and graduating with our degrees. So I guess after college, what was the next step? I realize for some of us, this is probably where we start to change a little bit in terms of some went on to additional schooling, some went right into the workforce. I don't think any of you went backpacking through Europe, but maybe you did. So what was your next step after undergrad?
Yeah, so 2 days after I graduated college, my now husband and I bought an old RV and we drove across the country for 3 months, exploring different national parks. And that's actually really when I got interested in wildlife. And after that, I started volunteering at a bird wildlife rehabilitation clinic, and the rest is history.
I kind of did the opposite of Brie in that instead of exploring the natural world, I went to mankind's great accomplishment, which is the city. I moved to New York City to start my aspiring acting career and began auditioning and trying to find jobs to keep a roof over my head, and did that.
I graduated my undergrad a semester early, so I used that time to go start learning to do wildlife rehab at the Minnesota Wildlife Center. And then after that, it was straight into vet school for the next several years.
For me, I moved right out here to Waynesboro, Virginia, knocked on the door of the Wildlife Center, and I said, can y'all give me a job? And it worked out. So here we are about a year later.
And similarly to Aaron, about 2 weeks after I graduated, I started working at the Wildlife Center of Virginia.
And she never left. How long ago was that, Amanda? Just for the viewers at home.
Just like two years ago.
Just a few years, yeah.
Yeah. I'm very young.
And so Cam, you kind of already mentioned it, that to get to where you are right now, to be Dr. Cameron Berg, you had to go back and get a little bit of additional schooling. And Brie and Ben, I'm curious, did you, or Amanda, did you all go back and pursue a postgraduate as well?
Yeah, so I went back and I got a master's of natural resources.
I did not pursue any additional education after I graduated with my undergraduate degree. I continued to stay in New York City and audition and started working different jobs, and considered going to some graduate acting programs, auditioned for a few, but never ended up pursuing any further educational opportunities until I kind of wound up here, which is an educational opportunity in and of itself.
Cam, do you want to talk a little bit about your experience?
Sure. So I went to vet school, which is 4 long, tiresome hours. And then once you finally graduate, you have the option to go into private practice or to pursue an internship. I did actually another internship before this one, where I was an emergency doctor for a year, which is also very tiring and stressful, but you learn a lot, and that's kind of what the goal is to come out with.
Yeah, kind of what Ben was saying about the educational aspect of just being here. As I mentioned earlier, I graduated with a degree in wildlife biology, and here I am doing communications work. So the past year has been extremely educational, especially with everything that's been going on. And so in a way, I still consider myself to be in school and still learning. And I think that's I think that's a reality for a lot of people, not only in this field, but just getting out into the world post-college in general.
And I also did not pursue any additional higher education, just have that good old biology degree, and that's it, which does feel kind of wild to me at this point, having been out of school for so long and seeing so many other people go on to additional schooling. But that's it for me, just an undergrad degree. Well, that was kind of a fun exercise of like snapshots throughout your life of what you thought you wanted to do, what you did, where you started branching out. Definitely some people jumped all around from different desires and hopes and dreams, and some people maybe kind of knew early on and followed a particular pathway, which I think is helpful in just, again, underscoring that idea of there's no exact right one way to end up where you want to be. So I'm guessing this is probably less of a snapshot question and more of a, just wondering if each of you can give us a summary of your post-college career path. So from that first job, kind of what else you did, other experiences that you've had. Cam may have already answered this because Cam's answer is school, internships, school. That's what veterinarians do.
So yeah, after I graduated college, I mentioned that I took that cross-country road trip and really got to, explore our natural world. And that's when I got really interested in working with wildlife. So I mentioned that I graduated with my undergraduate degree in environmental resource management. I had dual minors in watersheds and water resources, and then also in wildlife and fishery science. So my first job out of undergrad was actually as a stormwater technician for the Delaware Department of Transportation. And so I was basically mapping the stormwater system for the state of Delaware using GIS. Definitely not my favorite thing. And that's when I started volunteering at that wild bird clinic just to gain some hands-on experience working with wildlife. I really knew that I wanted to go back to grad school and wanted to have that for my graduate school applications. At the time, I thought that I hated birds because my only experience with birds was pet birds. Yeah, didn't love that. So I'd actually tried to volunteer for a mammal rehabilitator, but she wasn't taking any volunteers. So I was like, fine, I guess I'll do the birds. Fell in love, and I am 100% a bird nerd now. And so a job came up at that wild bird clinic that I was volunteering at. And, I left my salaried with benefits position at the stormwater technician to make not a lot of money and work every single weekend for about a year. Yeah. And from there, I kind of grew in my role. And now I'm at my third wildlife rehabilitation center.
Brie, I don't think I ever knew that.
That I hated birds? Yeah, I really didn't think that I liked them.
That's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I know. Everyone just thinks that like I came out of the womb a bird nerd, but no, it was like not until like age 23 and I was like, these are awesome.
So after I arrived in New York City, I began auditioning for shows, and a big part of acting is that the job is really trying to get cast, less actually getting to act in shows. But I was fortunate enough to book some work and appeared in multiple productions regionally and in New York City, a couple of shows off Broadway, which were probably the highlight. Then I had the opportunity to go out and go on tour with an educational theater company. And I did that for 2 years, traveling all around the country in a van, a box truck, and a sedan, going from place to place. And that was really kind of a formative experience, getting to go and experience parts of the country that I'd never seen before. And it definitely kind of reawoke a joy for exploring nature. After that, I returned to the Charlottesville, Waynesboro, Central Virginia area where I had grown up to pursue weight loss surgery, actually. And that was a long process, involved 6 months of prep work and then the surgery and then recovery. And it was during the recovery process that the COVID-19 pandemic began, which kind of blew up my plans of returning to New York and getting right back to my acting career. And it was during that time that I started to consider whether or not I might want to pursue some work with wildlife, because I'd always been passionate about animals. I did come out of the womb a bird nerd. And I had been working in a kennel while I was getting ready for the surgery, and just catching bits and pieces of different TV shows and becoming interested in the possibility of, when I returned to New York, trying to pursue work that was related to wildlife, or something that I felt more passionate about, and as just a means of making some money while I continued to look for acting work. But definitely saw that as a kind of something on the side. And then the pandemic kind of changed everything, and I ended up taking an externship here. And that kind of has launched me into where I am now.
So it was vet school after that for me. Like I said, full-time job being a student for vet med. The first 3 years are just learning classes, and then the fourth year you start doing clinical stuff, seeing your own cases, talking to the clinicians that are overseeing you to try to really get a grip on things. And then my internship year, I was doing emergency medicine. I was one of the few people there who was excited about seeing wildlife or exotic species, and the rule was that if I was comfortable to see them, then I could see them and we could have them in, but I had to acknowledge that some of my staff weren't the most comfortable dealing with them, so I didn't get too much experience. But we would work with the Milwaukee Zoo back at home where I was doing this externship occasionally, so I would come in on my very limited number of days off to try to help with those kinds of procedures. And then this whole time I knew I wanted to do exotic or wildlife medicine, so I was applying for the position here, and eventually I got it, and I'm really glad I'm here now. I love it.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, we certainly love having you, Cam, and we love having you, Ben, as well. I mean, the path that y'all took to get here, it's totally different, but the amount of value that you both bring to the center is immense. My path is, I mean, pretty traditional. It should be mentioned that going to school for wildlife biology, a lot of my friends and colleagues and fellow students ended up getting internships and positions doing field work and research. And I realized pretty early on that I just wasn't cut out for that. I found a lot of joy and enjoyment in the interface that I could have with the public talking about these conservation and wildlife issues. And I decided to take my education and kind of gear it towards more of that outreach aspect. So I had internships focused on communications with different universities. I spent some time as a guide. I spent some time doing environmental education with youth in the Colorado area. And that's kind of what drew me here, was the opportunity to work in such a robust communications team that is able to reach a lot of different people all across the country and all across the world with these issues that are so prevalent, not only here in Virginia, but really everywhere, and applying those different learning experiences that I've had here to kind of that communications process as a whole. What about you, Amanda?
Well, if if I were to have a resume somewhere, dug deep in a drawer for a resume, my post-college career, organization listing would be one bullet point long. It's been the Wildlife Center for me, but my positions at the center have changed over the many years. So it has been more than 2 years for me. Shocking, I know, but. Yeah, actually, I guess I have to back up and just say that while in college, I went to college right up the road from the Wildlife Center, and that's when I was introduced to this notion of wildlife rehabilitation and a wildlife hospital. I still came to the center to start volunteering and then to do an internship, which at that time it's basically what we call an externship now. But I came to do that still with the goal in mind of like, I've always wanted to be a veterinarian, so that's what I'm going to do. But that externship opportunity was really was the life-changing opportunity for me to get hands-on experience in wildlife rehabilitation. Prior to that, I never knew that there was such a thing. So coming to the center and having that was huge, and I fell in love with it. I loved just the dynamic nature of like making meals, running around outside, exercising birds, going to get this patient for the vets, going to do this. It was just kind of all over the place. And I realized that the thing that I thought I wanted to do was perhaps not really what I wanted to do after all. So I stayed in touch with the Wildlife Center, and as I graduated, they were hiring. They were actually hiring for a weekend front desk coordinator and a 3-day-a-week rehabber. And they asked me, do you want a full-time or a part-time position? I'm like, well, I am just a poor college graduate. I need a full-time position. And that was it. So that was my little hybrid position to start with. And for me, it will be 20 years this summer since I started working at the Wildlife Center. Over the years, it started to become all rehabilitation work, and then a lot of rehabilitation and a little bit of outreach work, and then more outreach work and still a little bit of rehabilitation work until it, 10 years ago, 11 years ago now, became exclusively outreach. So one organization, but lots of jobs and lots of experiences within.
And Amanda, you sort of talked about how that changing nature of what you think you wanted versus what ended up happening, and changing that idea of what you think your future is going to look like. And so now let's go back to that kid, right? That 6-year-old that was sitting around with these big plans and big dreams. Do you think that kid, and this is a question for all of you, do you think that kid would be surprised at where you ended up? Do you think they'd be happy, sad? Like, what would that look like, do you think, and why or why not?
I think that 6-year-old Brie would be very pleased by the number of animals that are in my life right now.
6-year-old Ben would be ecstatic. 16-year-old, more jaded Ben might kind of be like, what happened, man? We had such dreams. But I think that it is very interesting that my 6-year-old self was more attuned to, I think, something at the core of who I am than the person who I was when I was figuring out what I wanted to do as someone getting ready to go to college. When I wrote my cover letter for the externship, I actually phrased it as, by sending this in, I am making my 8-year-old self very proud because I'm pursuing this opportunity, because the Wildlife Center of Virginia specifically was a touch point for me growing up in Charlottesville, and just having a voracious appetite for people who work with wildlife, and just, going up to the National Zoo and triangulating any place where I could be aware of people who had careers in wildlife. So to have the opportunity to not just be working with wildlife, but to be working here specifically would send 6-year-old Ben over the moon.
I think 6-year-old Cameron would be a little disappointed that I don't have a tail or superpowers or something, but I think overall he'd be pretty pleased with how many animals and people he's able to help during the course of his career.
I think 6-year-old Aaron would probably be confused because I don't know if I could explain to him what I do. But I think that it, like Ben was saying, at the very core of it, I think I would like to think that 6-year-old Aaron would be pretty psyched because at the end of the day, I'm working in nature, with nature, for nature, with animals, for animals. And really that's kind of what I really enjoyed as a kid, was reading National Geographic and reading, the picture books with the different animals. And just, I've always been into this stuff at a very, very early time, very early level. And so I think if I could just tell him like, hey, I mean, you're working with animals, you're working with wildlife, and he'd be pretty satisfied.
I think if you told 6-year-old Amanda that she was working at the Wildlife Center of Virginia, she would think like, oh, yes, okay, that seems like a good thing that will happen in life. I think if you told 6-year-old Amanda that she would be the VP for outreach and education at that organization, she'd say, no, you're insane. That cannot be correct. I was very afraid of public speaking and all that, so.
So that was gonna be our follow-up question was it a challenge for you to kind of overcome that to get into the position that you are now?
Yes, absolutely. For me, still even, you tell 16-year-old or 21-year-old or however old I was when I started working at the Wildlife Center, standing up in front of people and, leading open houses or programs or hit TV shows over Zoom, was just not something I ever really envisioned, but I think it just goes to show that you can surprise yourself, and it's always important to challenge yourself and just be open to new opportunities. So this has been an interesting journey through careers and ideas. My big question though for everyone is, if you had a singular piece of advice to give to someone, because I'm sure someone out there watching is considering a career in this sort of world. And we get that question a lot of like, but what do I do? How do I achieve it? What degree do I get? What thing do I do? What do I check off my list to make sure I can end up in this world? And I hope that those watching are getting to realize that there is no one right way. But still, what is your greatest piece of advice for someone?
My biggest piece of advice is to volunteer. So I never would have known how much I love birds if I didn't start volunteering at that bird rescue. And it's just such a great way to get your foot in the door. I probably wouldn't have gotten that first job at that bird clinic had I not already been a volunteer and made connections. I'm going to actually give 2 pieces of advice, even though Amanda didn't ask for it. But my other piece of advice would be to get involved with some professional societies. So for us, the Wildlife Society is a really good one. And through that, you can meet people and, have conversations like this in person whenever we're allowed to resume in-person things again. But, ask people, how did you get to where you are? What's your favorite part of your job? What maybe don't you like about your job? And that way that can kind of help you decide what steps you can take to get where you want to be.
Before answering the big question, I just want to take a moment to highlight that I believe Cam has the best knowledge of what a 6-year-old actually wants their life to be. And I applaud his honesty in highlighting that we all just wanted to probably be dogs. In terms of advice, I would encourage everyone to believe in your passion and to speak from it. It is very easy to write a good cover letter or be the right person for a job when you are, because you are passionate about it and because you do care about it. And that can overcome a lot of inexperience, a lot of things that may not be ideal, like not having a related degree to the field, like my situation. But it's something that I was always incredibly passionate about. And because I was able to access and speak from that place of passion, I was able to demonstrate that I would bring something to the organization, and I would work hard for them. And then if you do get that opportunity, cherish it. And I would say work to demonstrate your capabilities as a worker. If you're in a good organization, they're not going to expect you to know absolutely everything, because it's a field where learning is a constant. But what you can demonstrate is that you're devoted, and that you are detail oriented, and that you are going to give yourself with passion to this process and this work. So that would be my advice.
Passion was going to be one of my things I was going to say, so I guess I'll just move on to my second thing. I would say always keep always asking questions. There's a whole world out there that we know so little about, and just by asking questions, staying curious, it can kind of drive your passion. It can open up new routes and avenues that you didn't even know were there, and it can really kind of further the whole field, further your colleagues, your friends. Potentially, it could even affect the world, provided enough people like jump on and keep looking and learning. So I'd say stay curious, stay inquisitive, and keep that passion driven towards learning.
I would say, on top of everything that the three of you have already said, I think those are awesome, is try new stuff, try different things, be willing to step out of your comfort zone and try things that might not be what initially, you thought you'd end up doing, but sound interesting. I mean, the world is a big place. All of us bring a lot of different stuff to this organization, or Brie's organization as well, in the skills that we have, the background that we have, the different experiences and life lessons or things that we've done, all allow us to be better at our job, I think. And so I think like finding different experiences, finding ways to challenge yourself and push your limits can not only add more qualifications to your resume, but can ultimately add a lot more to your own personal satisfaction in the position, and also just through life, I think.
Yeah, and my advice would be do an externship, internship, whatever the organization wants to call it, if you can. I know that can be challenging for some to devote that chunk of time, but just speaking from experience, that's what did it for me, was to really have that really in-depth time to like day in, day out, do a thing, see if I liked it. That was such a valuable experience. So I think it can really teach you a lot about the thing that you think you want to do, and maybe the thing that you actually want to do, and see if those things match up. And then really just to echo Brie's point as well, see, I don't have any new advice. This is all just re-emphasized advice, is making connections in the field. And I know, I feel like if somebody told 16-year-old Amanda that advice, that would be challenging, because 16-year-old Amanda was very shy. But making those connections and just getting more involved, and there are professional societies, there are different conferences which can offer some really good opportunities to meet people. I feel like we all say this, classic like networking thing, but it is really valuable. And I think a lot of us in this field work closely together. 4 out of the 5 of us are working at the Wildlife Center of Virginia. Brie used to work there too. Now it's at Rockfish. But we work so closely with so many different types of people in this field. So think about our different nonprofits working with our state agency, who regulates the permitting for wildlife rehabilitation, who have biologists and officers and those different sorts of people. We work very closely with animal control officers and other veterinarians who don't specialize in wildlife, but who refer us cases. So there's just so many different types of positions out there. So just getting to know different people and having opportunities where you can talk to them and kind of get to know more about their position and the people that they work with can be really useful.
Absolutely, and those connections, as Amanda said, it cannot be emphasized enough how important, because you never know down the road when you're going to be hosting a web-based talk show and you need some guests. So at the very least, keep that in mind. But Brie, Dr. Cam, Ben, thank you all so much for being here today. Thank you all for, traveling those individual paths that led you to join us as guests today on Untamed Unfiltered. We really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And to the viewers, thank you for tuning in, and join us next week for a very special live episode of Untamed Unfiltered. But for now, this is going to be us signing off. Thank you so much to all of you. And this has been Untamed Unfiltered. We'll see y'all next time. Bye, everyone.